Hey, folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and I'm extremely excited today to have a great friend of mine, a personal friend, and certainly a friend of the program with me today. Her name is ShaCarol Green. ShaCarol, just as of yesterday, time of recording at least, just celebrated her 4-year transplant anniversary, and I was so excited and thrilled to see that day come for her. I'm certainly glad that she had the best day she could, and that certainly she has done as well as she has. Now, ShaCarol and I crossed paths pretty much about 4 years ago. This time I was over in UAB hospital, kind of doing some dropping into some rooms, checking on people, asking some questions, seeing if I could help them out. And ShaCarol happened to be one of those people that I rolled the door back on. I can remember sticking my head in. She probably looked shocked, like, who is this idiot standing in my room? And a few minutes later, we softened up a little bit and got to be great friends. So I'm excited to have you with me today, ShaCarol, and I would love for you to tell your story in your own words. So how about we start doing that by allowing you to tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your family or caregiver.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Yes, that was a funny story when you walked in. We'll get into that later. But yes, I'm ShaCarol Green. I am 37 years old. I am a wife to Jeffrey Green and a mother to a beautiful 9-year-old daughter, Jada Green. Um, and my husband, of course, Jeffrey is the best caretaker. I, of course, I'm being very biased, but he is the best. He has been there every step of the way without one single complaint. And sometimes I know we can feel guilty or feel bad. And he's constantly reminding me that, hey, he took his vows for this. So I am very blessed in that situation.
Right. He's great. I can tell you it's from just firsthand experience getting to meet Jeff. Absolutely great guy.
Yes, he is. And my daughter, she has become a mini nurse. She's making sure my meds are on time, and she's, if my 9 o'clock alarm goes off and she hears it and I don't, she is running, mommy, it's time for your medicine. So they have trained her well there at UAB.
Well, Jada's a beautiful little girl and certainly precious, and I'm glad that she's kind of taken on that little extra role. It's great that you've got that backing you up. Well, let me ask you another question, kind of get us started with your story itself, and that is, how were you first introduced to transplant? What caused you to need a heart transplant?
Well, after giving birth to that beautiful 9-year-old girl, I got congestive heart failure, and because my I had extreme preeclampsia and my blood pressure just would not go down. Now, honestly, for the first 4 years or so after having her, medicines worked. My cardiologist, everything was going fine, but eventually the medicine stopped working.
Hmm.
And so, after talking to Dr. Pambukian and Dr. Talaj, they kept saying, "Hey, well, they honestly told me the LVAD was the next step." And I'll be honest, that was just not something I wanted. I did not want it, but I did have to get that eventually in 2017 as well on July 21st. And so that is how I was kind of introduced to it. And of course, a blood clot came 9 days after having the
Mm.
LVAD, and so we had to make decisions on whether you, of course, they were going to go back the next day and get the blood clot out, but I was placed on the transplant list as well that same day.
Okay. So transplant, had it been brought up along with the LVAD and you just not been listed yet, or had they talked about it yet?
They had talked about it, but the thing is, I was not. They didn't feel that I was strong enough to survive
Gotcha.
a transplant. So they felt that that the LVAD would give my heart a more function, of course, and which it did, to to even withstand a transplant.
Okay.
They just really did not think so. I was on the list, and then I was getting worked up to be on the list
Okay.
actually. And when I got the LVAD,
Right. Okay. Which,
and
the LVAD, you know this and most do that watch something like this. The LVAD keeps you off the list for a period of time, typically, which we're going to get past that
yeah,
in a minute. But yeah, you got a story to tell. But let me ask you this, just kind of as a side note, because I know I didn't want the LVAD either. What were your particular reasons for not wanting it that time?
I'm a very independent person.
Uh,
I hate micromanaging, and when I say that, I knew if I had the LVAD, that I would have to have someone with me 24/7. And being the only child, the thought of that was just
Yeah.
like, God, why do I love my mom, I love my husband, but I don't want them to quit their jobs to take care of me.
Right.
So I love to swim. I knew I wouldn't be able to do that. It was minor things, I guess, selfishly. But when I was told that if I don't get it, I'll probably have till Christmas, and that was August, and to Christmas only 4 more months,
Right.
it was really a no-brainer. It's like, okay, well, let me stop being selfish and get this done.
Yeah, they've got a way of persuading us somehow. I
Yeah.
don't know what that was. I've had it with Pambukin particularly, and nobody else in the room probably knows who that is, but we certainly know. And she's got
Yeah,
a
well,
way of just letting you know, if you'd like to die, go home.
yeah, well, Talad is the one told me, he was like, Miss Green, I know you don't want it, but hey, you might not live past Christmas if you
Right.
don't get it. I'm like, oh, so live or die.
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. We're going to live. So
Yeah.
do what you got to do.
Yeah, go get those papers. I'll sign.
Yes, yes. Literally, that's what we did that day.
All right, so they bring up transplant right then. Tell me a little bit about the process. I've heard some of this, but I think I'd love to hear it again about how you got from LVAD to transplant in this whirlwind that you were involved in.
Yes. So, like I said, on August the 21st of 2017, I got the LVAD. And in most cases, most people come, I've heard all these wonderful stories about once they get the LVAD, people start to feel better, things start going in the right direction. I'm gonna be honest, I did not feel that great after my LVAD. I just did, and I was thinking, well, maybe okay, a few days. I give it a few more days. On that eighth day, on July 29th, I just really was feeling horrible. I was irritable. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to cooperate. And anyone that knows me knows I'm a very compliant person.
Right.
My nurses were in shock. They were like, well, why is Miss Green not doing what we asked her to do? And of course, the LVAD coordinator at that time, Lauren, came in and she looked at my LVAD numbers and everything, and she rushed out. And we're all like, oh, okay. Because my mom, she was supposed to be taking my mom and my husband and my aunt at the time to have a class, for caregivers.
Right.
But she just rushed out. And when she said, okay, she came back and said, we have to have some tests run. Just get in the bed, stay in the bed. We knew something was wrong, didn't know. They came in, they did the echo. Come to find out, I had a blood clot in the heart. Then, so they're like, okay, well, we know you have to go back in tomorrow, get you a new LVAD, remove the blood clot, whatever. If you know Yin, I know our transplant people at AUM know Yin. She comes in the room. It was 3:00 that day, well, around 3:00. She says, okay, well, we're going to put you on the transplant list. Honestly, that we were like, okay, cool, whatever. That goes over everyone's head because who's going to get a transplant? I'm already have to go to surgery the next day.
Right. They got too much going on for that.
Right. So, about 6:00, one of the doctors come in or call. At this point, I was out of it.
Right.
One of the doctors came in or called, I can't remember, and said, hey, we have a possible match. And I look in disbelief because like I said, I'm still, they drugged me up to keep me calm. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we have a possible heart match, transplant match. And I'm like, and my husband, everyone is just hysterical. And I'm like, and I'm still sitting there looking like, huh?
Yeah.
And I'm like, tomorrow? I'm like, I know we're going to surgery tomorrow. And they're pretty much like, no, we have a possible match. And they have to say possible because for most people that don't know, they still have other tests and everything to run to give it a go. And they really do this up until right before they take you in the operating room.
Right.
Or even into the operating room, they're still doing tests. And around 8:00 that night, it was a go. It was a go that I was going the next day. Instead of getting a new LVAD or getting the blood clot removed, I got a new transplant the next day, August 30th, 2017.
Wow.
So I was on the transplant list, I guess 3 hours, you want to say?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, that was my next question. How long was your wait? That's not much of a
Just
wait.
3
Officially,
hours.
officially not much of a wait. Well, again, backing up a little bit, as we understand, typically when someone gets an LVAD,
Mm-hmm.
Not only is that a life changer, and like you say, lose some independence and stuff, but they're if they were on the list, they're off the list. They're status 7
Yeah.
for a period of time. Back when you and I were going through this, that was still 2 to 3 months, if not more. And
Yes.
they just don't allow that. You just don't get to get a transplant like this. But I guess you were going into surgery anyway, so they
Exactly.
weren't avoiding a surgery by not doing it. So,
So I tell people I got a 2-for-1 deal while I was
oh yeah,
there. Remind you, I was only supposed to be in the hospital a week getting worked up for the
yeah,
transplant.
yeah,
Not even for an LVAD, not for any of
yeah.
that. All of this happened.
Yeah, because you
So
didn't go in because you were, and I don't want to take away from this, but you weren't necessarily deathly ill the day you walked in. You went in for the workup, right?
exactly. But when I got there, um, my nurse and the head nurse, I didn't know how, how we're sick when you've been sick for so long, it's become the norm.
Yeah.
And so it's just what life is. And you don't really realize how sick you are. And so I walked in the room and they had a crash cart, which is what they told me later, that they were ready to code me.
Mm,
And they were astonished that I was walking and talking and laughing.
wow.
And they kept asking my name and I wasn't sure why. And they were like, well, honestly, we weren't looking for you to walk in here like this. And because that had become the way of life for me. But on paper, that's why the doctor realized I only had 4 months. So,
Right.
and I had given them, and backing up a little again, when I had went to a clinic, not a clinic day, but a doctor's appointment with Dr. Pambukian on the 9th of August. And she called me as soon as I got back home and was like, hey, we need you to come back to stay the week for the workup. And then
Hmm.
my daughter started kindergarten the next day, and I just told them I can't come tonight. I can come tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they were worried, and I did not for the life of me understand why until I got there.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
they did allow me to take her to kindergarten and drop her off, and come to say, hey, that August 10th turned until standard to September 15th until after my transplant.
Yeah. Well, again, not to take away from any of our transplant team. You've already named Dr. Talaj, Dr. Pambucan. You've named some of the coordinators, Ian and Lauren, and some others. But Dr. Pambucan is special. And
Very.
again, don't take away from any others, but Dr. Pambucan is special. One, well, I laugh and I jokingly say this: if you make her an enemy, you've made an enemy that you didn't want. But if as long as you can get her on your side, and that's not
Yeah.
to take away from her, but once you get her on your side, she will fight for you like nobody else.
Yes.
And her now, she did this right at not too long after she dealt with you in this time frame. Dr. Pembucan is kind of the head of the women's heart transplant / heart failure thing. And so she's got
Hmm.
some real expertise, particularly in dealing with women and their symptoms and how to read those symptoms. So she had some wisdom there, I think, coming into this.
Yes, and she's so humble. I just love her. And I remember a time when she had the fellows walking around with her, and this was after the transplant, and she definitely said, "Do not." She said, they tell most doctors, look at access your patients, look how they feel. They'll tell you how they feel by looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, don't look at ShaCarol. Read her numbers because she will lie to you every time. I'm a very upbeat person. Like they literally told me I'm dying in 4 months, and I'm still like, okay, cool. So what do we have to do now?
Yeah.
Like I refuse to get down. So she was like, don't look at her. She's gonna laugh all the time. She's gonna smile. She's gonna talk to you. Just look at her numbers.
I've had a handful of people, my mother being one of them, pre-transplant. They always joke that you need to write a book, and if you write a book, the title needs to be "I'm fine," because
Yeah.
it didn't matter what anybody asked. Even they could look me in the eye and tell different, but they'd say, "How you doing?" "I'm fine. I'm fine."
Yep.
And a
That's me.
big goofy grin. "I'm fine." But
Yep.
the truth was, I knew I wasn't. Deep down. But hey,
Exactly.
what good does it do to complain? So that's
That's my
funny.
motto. That's my motto.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I remember most about you from meeting with you. That there was that little shock. You could tell that part. But when I first came in, but once we opened up a little bit, you were just one of the funnest people as far as, your character and the way you carry yourself and the way you, I almost say the way you take things lightly. You don't take them lightly, but the way they seem like, you make it
Yeah.
seem like it's no big deal. So that's
Yeah, that
excellent.
story is funny when you came in the room, but you can tell me when we can go into that. That is a funny
Well, you can
story.
go for it now because our next question will move on from that.
Okay. Well,
I
it
know you're
was funny.
recovering at this point. This is when I come
Yeah, I
in.
was
You're about 4 days
recovering.
post, I think. So,
Yeah, like 3 or 4 days post, and it's funny. My husband had left, so I was in the room by myself, and because I had these major heart surgeries back to back, my legs were extremely weak. I could not get up on my own. I could
mhm.
once I was up, I could walk, but I just could not stand up and get up on my own. So I'm laying in the bed watching TV or whatever I was doing. In comes Jim. I had no clue who he was. He's dressed in plain clothes. I'm like, he's not a doctor. He's not a nurse. Who is this guy? And he just comes in, and I'm like, oh my God, who is he? And if something happens, how do I get out of here? So I'm like, what is going on? But of course, I'm keeping my composure. He's smiling. I'm smiling. We're talking, and he introduced himself and started telling his story. And of course, my walls and everything came down. He's such a great guy. And we talked, and that conversation, I tell everyone, it changed my outlook on recovery.
Oh, well,
To hear you say, well, I'm a very competitive person, let me say that.
mhm.
And to hear you say that, I had to walk, we have to walk those 20 laps, we have to walk that mile. And to hear you say that you walked it that first week, I was like, I got to get up. I have 2 more days ahead of him. So I have to walk my mile. And so it's like, it just changed. I'm like, if he can do it and I can see the outcome, could not tell you had a transplant coming in there. You was just, because I just did not see this recovery happen as fast as it did.
Right, right,
Because it seems like it should be so long. Like I couldn't even walk, couldn't even stand up at this time.
right.
How could I recover that
Well, you
fast?
got up and got moving, that's for sure. And I remember, of course, we talked and we loosened up, but at the same time, one of the ways I knew, at least I thought I knew that I maybe made a little bit of progress is before I left. You kept saying, I wish Jeff was here. He's went downstairs. He'll be back in a minute. I wish he could have
Hmm.
met you. And I'm like, well, I wish I could. And we ended up crossing paths, not that day, I guess, but maybe later,
Yes.
or maybe. Wait a minute.
I think it was later. It was one of my clinic days
Yeah, it
after I
was. It
got
wasn't
out.
too much later, but yeah, but great guy and glad to meet him. So that's a whirlwind of a story, to go in such a short time to
Yeah.
from. Of course, I know backing up with Jada and the birth, that part of it took a while, but
Yeah.
getting up to this is it, that we don't have any other options, to LVAD and then over
Mhm.
to transplant in just those short, what'd you say, 9 days, 8 days,
9 days
nine
from the
days. It's
21st of August
impressive.
to the 30th. Yes.
Wow. Wow. And that's, I tell people, and you understand this, I was congenital. So I went through, well, a whole lifetime, really, 38 years, but particularly the last 6, I went through preparing
Hmm.
myself, learning about this, getting, psyched out and, and ready for the process. People like you don't have that benefit.
I didn't
Sometimes I
have the
think
chance.
just getting it done may be nice in some ways, but you don't have that benefit. You don't have the mental preparedness and such. It's a shock. I mean, just knock you off your feet, right?
It was, and I'm gonna be honest, like what helped me so much, and I know I keep coming back to you, and you, of course, you didn't pay me to say these things, but giving me when you gave me the links to your YouTube and I subscribed, I literally, because I wasn't doing anything else in the hospital, watched every single video that you had posted.
Hmm.
Because to me, we had the same doctors, we had the same team, we had it at the same place. Who else better to tell me? And even in my head at that time, better than the nurses, because they had not gone through this.
No.
You've gone through this. Who else better for me to learn from than you? You knew what I was going through. You knew what I was looking for ahead of time. You had been there at the exact same facility, same doctor, same nurses.
Right. Right.
So your videos, I even had my family subscribe to them. They were calling me, telling me things. So it was that's you really taught me. I don't know if you remember, there were plenty of times I'll have questions. I'm like, my husband's like, call Connie. I'm like, nope, I'll call Jim.
Yep.
Let me
And
text
this,
you.
yeah, that has happened. That has happened on a number of occasions. But again, and I'm flattered by that. Thank you for that. But I understand, and I've said it so many times about what I'm able to do and blessed to do. I get to speak from a been there and doing that perspective, not done that, but doing that perspective. And for you, that was even more special. There's a handful of others in the same boat. We're all UAB people. And so when
Yeah.
I tell them the doctor will tell you this, and the doctor that will tell you this, his name is Dr. Talaj or Dr. Van Buchen
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
Connie or Yin, and I call these names, I guess it's a whole different perspective when we get to share those people. We get
Yes.
to know their characters and get some insight into that. So I'm thrilled for that. So tell me about your recovery process. I got to meet you that fourth day and then have
Yes.
seen you dozens of times since. But tell us about your recovery.
My recovery, and I know, and I tell people this as a joke, but I'm not joking. I didn't have the pain people thought I had
Hmm.
during recovery. My chest just did not hurt. I tell people I'd rather have another transplant than have another C-section. I the pain to me was a lot worse having a C-section. I know that sounds crazy. And I don't know if it was off of the high of being alive, um, that I just I just felt better. I just felt good. I wasn't winded walking down the hallways anymore to where before transplant I couldn't even walk from my bathroom to my living room.
Hmm.
So I think I was just off of a life high of being alive to where I was willing to do everything, like I said, to get to where Jim was, where he can walk around like normal. And so it would be times even at night I couldn't sleep. I would have my nurses like, hey, come take me for a walk. I
Mm-hmm.
want to get some laps in because I was determined to be able to walk without the walker, to be able to just walk and to be able to do things and just stand on my own. Um, so I thought, honestly, I was like, they're saying I'll be here 2 weeks. I'm like, that's not long enough for me to heal. But in a week and a half, shortly after Jim left, like the next week, I was getting up on my own, going walking around on my own, not having to depend on the walker and things like that. The hardest thing was doing the steps, I think, because my
Right.
legs were still weak. But I was able to do it with assistance of the handrails and things like that. So and I tell people, like, and I've learned this from you. This is one of your quotes. Transplant is not a cure. So, like you said, these are things we're still doing. Every day is still not sunshine and
Yeah.
sunflowers. Um, but I wake up thankful every day.
What a blessing. And you did. You made some turnaround progress there, and it's so important. And I want to emphasize this that you already have learned, but it is so important. Your recovery or someone's recovery 6 months out has so much to do with what happened 6 days out. Really.
That's
I
it.
mean, whether the quicker you can get out of that bed, and it's not possible. You had those 4 days where it just wasn't going to happen. But the quicker you do get out of that bed and the quicker you can get moving, the better off you'll be, period.
Yeah.
And, we've probably heard that after other types of surgeries, where you get mad because the nurse made you get up 4 hours after you had your appendix out or something. But
Mhm.
it, it's for real. It makes a difference. It makes a huge impact in recovery. And I'm glad that your recovery has gone as well as it is. So 4 years,
Yeah, they made me get up the next day after my transplant.
yeah,
They made me get up and walk with machines dragging.
yeah,
So that was, and I was determined. They were like, "Want to stop?" I'm like, "Nope, let's keep going." And I walked a few hundred feet, and that's nothing.
yeah.
But a day after a heart transplant, pulling machines with you,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It is great. You did excellent, and you continue to do that way. So, a few bumps in the road. Any major mix-ups since the 4 year period? Over this 4 year period?
No major issues. Like I said, I had a few minor, like that first year, I had what they call a fungal pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
I went for a general clinic visit and they stuck me in the hospital. And I felt perfectly fine. I was like, what do you mean I'm having to stay overnight? Wound up having to stay a week because of a fungal pneumonia, something, I can't control. The next year, 2019, I had the CMV. I guess, just pretty much caught a bad cold.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and no one meant to give it to me. I just got it. Stayed in there 2 weeks. And this last year, actually, December 2020, um, my blood count, my hemoglobin dropped, and they checked everything, and the only thing they can chalk it up to was a transplant issue.
Hmm.
So I literally spent Christmas Eve night in the hospital getting a blood transfusion.
Hmm.
Um, but I felt fine. I was a little tired, not as tired as they thought I should be. Um, but those are just some minor things that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And the only thing they can chuck it up to is, hey, it's a transplant thing. It happened.
Yeah. We do some weird stuff for sure.
Very, very
We
weird.
can definitely get them confused and bumfuzzled for a little bit. Well, tell us
Yeah.
this, and I think you can handle this very well. What has been, you've almost touched on it, I guess. What has been the best and the worst things about transplant for you?
The best thing is I feel normal. I can walk. Um, for instance, this past summer we went to my family we went to Chattanooga. I was able to climb mountains. I
Yeah.
was able to walk in caves. I was able to walk miles without feeling like I've run marathons. I can be the mother and the wife I was before. Just being able to breathe,
Yeah.
being able to breathe and being able to do things with my family and them not have to worry if I'm going to be okay is the best things. The worst things to me so far is I don't always feel great every day.
Yeah.
When I say that I have a lot of body aches, I don't know if that's for everyone. I know some people said they have experienced it. I have a lot of body aches. And I know that has something to do with our medications. Um, but honestly, that's the worst that I can say
And that's
because
not too terrible there. So,
no, I have a lot of body aches, but that is, hey, that's it. I can't complain about anything else.
yeah. Well, you're not a complainer anyway, but
No.
we have ups and downs, good days, bad days, and I'm in the same boat with you. I'll have, and I can't put a number on it, but I may have 4 days in a row where I'm like, wow, that's what an unbelievable, gift this. And I'm 8 years out looking
Mhm.
at this, still thinking it, but what an unbelievable gift this has been. And then, bam, it hit me the next day for no rhyme or reason. And I'm just like, oh, back on the couch. But it happens.
Yeah,
That's just part
it
of the
happens.
deal. But it's still a blessing. No matter what, it's still a blessing.
And one thing I've learned is listen to my body. When it
Yeah.
says rest, rest. Don't push it.
Yeah. Because you will definitely pay if you do. All of us will for
Yeah.
that. So, what advice then? This is kind of the final grand finale. What advice would you like to give to someone, whether they're pre or maybe just shortly after post transplant, that maybe would help them to live a better life?
Listen to your doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Tap in to all of the little groups, transplant groups on all your social sites. Get information, ask the questions, and get your support team in order.
Hey,
Because one thing I know, if your support team is not in order, they will definitely second guess your transplant.
yeah.
Get your support team in order. Get mentally prepared. Ask the questions. You don't know unless you don't ask. Unless you're like me and say, hey, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well,
Ask the questions if you're able to get that head start. I didn't have a head start. I figured it out afterwards. But ask the questions. Don't be afraid. Reach out.
I agree with that 100%. And it's always been kind of cliche that in a lot of areas in life, knowledge is power, and this is certainly one of them because knowledge is more than power. It can be survival in this.
That's it.
Just knowing your
Definitely.
body and knowing what to do with it, and the advice you
Definitely.
get.
That is it. That is most definitely right.
Well, I have enjoyed knowing you the last 4 years. It was certainly a blessing and a gift that God sent me that day to walk in your room, to stumble in, and to get to know you as a friend. And I tell you what, yeah, I don't know if you have a bigger fan, maybe Jeff, maybe, but you may not have a bigger fan in life than me. I've been cheering you on the whole way, and I tell people all the time, I plan to break records myself as far as, survival after transplant without issue, but I want you
Yes,
to trail me really tight and close behind.
I
I want you to
am.
outrun me if you have to, but go on and do it because I'm excited for you to do so.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to say it. I pray that I'm not jinxing myself. I believe in God, so I believe in His blessings.
No, you'll be
But I
good.
have definitely gone 3 years at least, and I'd say four because my next appointment is next week.
Hmm.
With no rejections.
Well, amen to that.
So,
I'm certainly
from
thrilled.
day
That's a
one,
blessing.
everything is fine, and that is a blessing. And next week, I said it'll be my 4 year checkup. So, and I feel great, so I don't foresee anything going wrong.
No. Probably not. Well, I appreciate you personally again for being here, sharing your story in your own words. Let me remind anyone who may have watched till this point, you know what you just heard, but I would love to share your story as well. So if you want to reach out to me, any place you can find me here in the comments, my number, I'll pop up on the screen right now. You can text my personal cell phone number. I'd love to talk to you. And I would love to share your story because these stories not only continue to motivate ourselves and one another, but I think in a real sense, they're promoting organ donation because people can see the lives and know the faces and the stories that are behind this and how great it is. So, ShaCarol, you have certainly give us a monumental story to hear from, and what an amazing journey you've been on. I thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
All right, good to talk to you.
You too.
Hold up, how can I even consider this a part of my Transplant Helper series without saying, like I always do, stay stronger, friends.